Recently, indie animated pilots have had a bit of a golden age. The most recent indie pilot success has been the Amazing Digital Circus, and I really like it. I've got a lot of issues with the writing and presentation, but I think the core of the series is exceptional, so I want to talk about it. I'll be talking about the good, then the bad, and then what I think makes the show really special. Note that I'm probably going to come across as very negative at times. I have quite a few criticisms of the show, and some may seem pretty harsh. But trust me when I say I have nothing but love for all of the artists involved in the show and for the show itself. I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't think that this show had genuinely incredible potential. The Amazing Digital Circus is about a group of people that have been randomly transported to a circus-themed virtual reality, their names forgotten, and their bodies transformed into cartoons. For all they know, there is no way out, and the best they can hope for is to just not go insane. There's Gangle, the emotional one, Zooble, the sarcastic one, Jax, the really sarcastic one, Kinger, the crazy one, Ragatha, the nice one, Kane, the ringleader, and Pomni, the new meat. The character designs are really great. The weakest ones, in my opinion, are Gangle and Zooble. Their designs aren't very defined, Gangle is simple, and Zooble is cluttered. Neither of them grab me as much as the others do, but that may change with another installment. As their personalities get more development, their designs may fit better, so we'll just have to see. Kane has a great design. The disembodied eyes and the disembodied mouth are a brilliant way to push expressions to an uncanny degree. He's clearly taking some inspiration from the fast-talking, omnipotent genie or Bill Cipher archetype, which I love. Kinger takes after Kane with his floating eyeballs, but with no mouth and no limbs. He looks the least human of the main cast, which works perfectly with his character. Having been there the longest, he's unhinged. He's the least in touch with his humanity. While I think her character model is a bit weird, I'll get into why later, Pomni has a fantastic design. She has largely simple primary colors. Her main feature is her giant eyes. Her multicolored pupils and mismatched eyelashes draw attention to them. She's able to give tons of expression with her stunned reactions and glassy stares. Her defining trait is anxiety, and those eyes perfectly convey that. Ragatha's personality is very similar to Pomni's, just tempered. She's been here longer, so she's less anxious and more friendly. She takes much of her appearance from Raggedy Ann, something that's nostalgic and cuddly, but still allows for tons of expression. It's the perfect, more relaxed evolution of Pomni. And then there's Jax. Jax has dealt with his situation by coating himself in a thick layer of irony and belittling the others. He seems to be based in part on the Kit Kat clock and Cheshire Cat, both of which have an air of coy, uncaring distance. He also takes overt inspiration from old Rubber Hose cartoons, sound effects and all. Many of those older cartoons feature a kind of grim disconnect with the subjects and a dark sense of humor, both of which are perfect for Jax. And lastly, I love his perpetual smile. He's trying to put on a snide, happy face, but he's literally talking through gritted teeth. That's a great double meaning. I think the pacing of the pilot is done really well. The creator, Gooseworks, mentioned on Twitter that she'd come up with 4 different plots for the pilot, and wound up doing all of them at once. You'd think that would wind up being a goddamn mess, but it flows really well. I like how the characters aren't going through the A-plot and B-plot in unchanging groups. It starts out with Pomni, Ragatha, and Jax dealing with the A-plot, Kinger and Gangle dealing with the B-plot. But over time, Jax changes sides, Ragatha is incapacitated, and Zooble is rescued by the B-team. It keeps things interesting for the viewer, we get to see more character interactions, and Pomni gets isolated to deal with her personal conflict in a way that feels natural. In the next segment, I'm going to heavily criticize the voice acting, animation, and writing, but they're not the worst. They each have quite a few excellent moments and individual gags. I just wish they were more consistently polished. A lot of the moment-to-moment writing is somewhat uncreative. Pomni telling herself it's all a dream, and Ragatha talking herself into a frenzy are very cliché setups, and some of Jax's quips feel more lazy than clever. I got a couple laughs from the pilot, but not as many as I'd like. It's disappointing because the sketches, comics, and shitposts the creator has been posting to Twitter are so much funnier. They are way more inventive and absurd and expressive than the actual pilot, so I know they're capable of writing good stuff. Even the meta gag of selling a sweatshirt with a catchphrase that wasn't in the show, that's funnier than most of the episode. I think a lot of the writing's weaknesses, however, come from the fact that this is a pilot. Going through the motions of this kind of plot is expected, and we haven't seen enough of these characters for their subtleties to really come through. I won't get hung up on this for now. I think episode 2 will provide a better slice of the show's writing as a whole, and I have faith it'll improve. I think the voice acting is overdone, which is a massive pet peeve for me. It feels like the actors were only given one-word instructions on how to deliver their lines. Kane, act excited.
This is where your living quarters are, as well as all sorts of other activities!
Jax, act sarcastic.
I'm fine with doing whatever, as long as I get to see funny things happen to people.
Pomni, act anxious.
Well, how do I, leave?
It works well with Kane. It could work well with Jax, depending on how well he's written. Ragatha and Kinger sidestep this issue. Their voice acting is really good. Gangle and Zubul are generally okay. Pomni needs to tone it down. She's the point of view character. She's meant to be the most relatable. Her voice acting and facial reactions should be a lot more subtle than they are, and only go to extremes when the story really calls for it, when it feels like something a real person would do. As it is, I find her obvious vocal performance combined with the obvious writing irritating. Especially during her cartoonish mental breakdown scenes. I just don't buy it. There are ways they can improve the style and animation. I think something that the pilot struggles with is easing. When not doing extreme pose-to-pose actions, which generally look really good, the characters have so much or so little follow-through that they begin to feel weightless. At times, the characters don't feel like they're the ones performing an action, like they're blobs of jello being yanked around by the animator. Adding some amount of realistic weight while retaining appeal and emphasis is something I've struggled with in my own work. Now, let's go to a more personal gripe with the overall style. When I first saw screenshots of the show, it seemed like its style would be close to early 2000s CGI children's shows, which is amazing. I didn't have Nick Jr. or Disney Jr. as a kid. I had Cubo. I had 321 Penguins. I had Jane and the Dragon. I had Jakers, The Adventures of Piggly-Winks. It's an aesthetic that's so weird but so charming, and maybe it's unfair to judge the show based on something that it may not have been trying to emulate in the first place, but I was disappointed when I found the pilot didn't lean further into an aesthetic like this. As it stands, the show doesn't really have a genre or niche to model itself after. In a way, that's good, it's very unique, but I feel the series could use a style like this, if only to riff on or parody. I want to see weird, borderline horrific character models rendered in the most primitive way possible, or poorly done motion capture, and I think it would fit this show's existing tone and style extremely well. All this is to say that I think a more stripped-back animation style would suit this show well. I think the funniest gags in the pilot already use very limited animation. By ignoring the retro angle, I almost feel like they're spending more time and more effort to make the show look worse. I'm going to get very specific with my criticisms here, and if anyone involved in the show takes anything specific away from this video, I would recommend changing this. I don't like Pomni's model. You can compare the original sketches to the final shots, and the appeal just isn't there. Not even the concept art. Compare the show with the storyboard. It's crazy just how much expression is lost. I think there are 3 factors to this. In the transition from 2D to 3D, her eyes shrank, her face got deep, and she got shiny. Pomni's whole design revolves around her expressive eyes, and every time she's redesigned, they get smaller. I don't know why. Not only did her eyes shrink in relation to her face, her pupils shrank in relation to her eyes. Both the original and final eyes have a huge variability in the pupil size depending on her emotions, but it seems like these are their respective default sizes. I love that the pupils can expand and contract with Pomni's mental state. The smaller pupils have their place, but as a default state, I find the wider eyes way more personable and way funnier. In addition to her facial features shrinking, her face got added depth and shininess. Her eyes and eyelids are super reflective, and her mouth has depth. These don't make the character more realistic, they just clash with the rest of her model, make it a bit more uncanny, and make her emotions more difficult to read at a glance. You could argue that that last point is a bit nitpicky, or that those details are good to include in a 3D model, but that's bullshit, because I can't make these complaints about Ragatha. They were more faithful to the original sketches. Her face is flat, her eyes are matte, and she looks good. I think a similarly two-dimensional graphic approach to Pomni would make her so much easier to watch. So the voice acting is uneven, the animation is weightless, the aesthetic is too modern, and I'm irritated by the main character's model. So why do I think the hype is justified? Why is this something I'm so passionate about? Why did I buy the poster? Well, for one, all of the issues I have with it have the potential to get better, way better, as this world and these characters develop. And I think the underlying themes of the show are really great. The Amazing Digital Circus is an escapist fiction that is largely a commentary on escapist fiction. The creator of this show is a trans woman, like myself, and once you realize that, I think the parallels to the real world become clear. Pomni is thrust into a world that doesn't suit her, in a body that doesn't suit her, with a name that doesn't suit her. She dissociates, she can't eat her food, she tries to rip off her own face. I think it's a pretty clear allegory for gender dysphoria. There's another side to this, though. For me, and I'm sure many other trans women out there, once you put aside the chronic anxiety of Pomni's character, the show is an escapist fantasy itself. Put yourself in her shoes. You're stuck forever in a small bubble that you can't alter too much, in an unfathomably massive void that you can't change at all. That's not great, but in addition to that, you're a woman, and you're surrounded by people in the same situation who can relate to you, so maybe things wouldn't be so bad. The mirror shot alone shows that despite spending most of her time trying to dissociate, she can overcome her initial shock. She can find comfort or even gender euphoria in her situation. Pomni holds on to the idea that she can escape her reality and find something better, but while that concept is energizing, it's also draining, and ultimately isn't sustainable. In that way, escaping to the real world, to a place that feels more genuine or fulfilling than the one you're in now, is a metaphor for escapist entertainment. When you become so invested in another world, you can lose yourself in it. Maybe not in a mazes and monsters, confused fantasy and reality kind of way, but you can isolate yourself, fall deeper into depression, exacerbate your real problems, and at some point, you have to accept you're stuck here. Fantasy has its place, but the way forward isn't living in another world. It's building a community and trying to improve the one you're in. While there is tons of art that I love, that I enjoy deeply, there are very few pieces of art that I truly, personally connect with. Movies like Wolfwalkers and games like Night in the Woods make me feel a level of heartbreak that these characters aren't real, that their story is over, and that I won't get to see more of them. The creators of those stories still work, and they still have potential to make great art, maybe better art, but those stories in particular are over. And that's why I had to speak about the Amazing Digital Circus. It gets me to relate to the characters really deeply, in a way that not many works of art can achieve, and there's still so much left to see. There's a lot to explore and a lot to improve on. The Amazing Digital Circus has a unique world, interesting characters, tons of unanswered questions. It's an exceptional starting point, and I desperately hope that they find their voice when it comes to the animation and writing. The pilot is good, but the potential here is amazing. Hey there. So, in the original end card, I shouted out the Gaslight District trailer and the MST3K Season 14 fundraiser. I'm very excited about those projects. But then I remembered that Israel is actively committing genocide against the Palestinian people. So any influence I might have should go towards that. And if you have some expendable income or some free time, I recommend supporting the Palestinian cause. There are links in the description to UNICEF and Doctors Without Borders, along with my socials. I'm sorry to bring down the mood at the end of the video, but I can't pass up the chance to bring attention to Palestine. Thank you for watching.